excited to share a little bit about the inside of our spring market that we're experiencing now, as well as a lot of our lessons learned over the last decade plus, and how we keep learning as we navigate new markets. So I'm going to jump right in. I'm Meg. I am the owner of Honorable Service Realty Group, and I have at least a few of my team members that were able to make it this evening. So Renee, you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Renee Conrad. I have been working with Meg here on the team for 9 years now. I started my career in real estate back in '04 in Manhattan, and by a very roundabout way, wound up here in Virginia with the opportunity to reignite this real estate career with Meg. And we've been growing this beast since then. Happy to be here tonight and here to answer any questions after our presentation as well.
Okay, I can see Mandy. I can't see who I might be missing, but I see Mandy.
It's Mandy and myself are on.
Okay.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Mandy, and I joined the team last year. And I'm a military spouse and veteran myself, so I love working with veterans, military families. I'll work with everybody, but that's kind of where my passion lies, is helping the military community of ours that we have so many of around here. So yeah, I look forward to seeing you all at events and getting to know anybody more. So thanks.
So the two
Alexis.
agents that we don't have here are Tabitha and Adriana. Adriana's been on the team. Sorry, Adriana's been on the team for about 8+ years.
Mhm.
And her background is very varied. She was a dentist in Columbia, went through med school, went to dental school, and then ended up migrating eventually to the States. And her husband is a retired Army, retired FBI, and now working for the DIA. And Tabitha is fairly new to the team as well. She works for a nonprofit, veteran affiliated nonprofit, and is also a fairly new realtor on our team, fairly new realtor in general, but a fantastic, sympathetic person to work with. So those two didn't make it tonight. Maybe they'll hop on later. And then Erica is my director of operations. And why don't you go ahead and tell a little bit about yourself, your ops team, our indispensable operations team. And then I'm going to probably give you the next slide too, because it's the folder, the folder.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Erica. I'm Meg's director of operations. We knew each other from our previous broker, and when she left, she stole me from them. So I am also a licensed agent. I'm behind the scenes a lot. Some of you, if you do a transaction with us in the near future, I will be your point of contact for that, because Erin is currently, and it's actually Erin Graham's now, she got married. I need to update that.
Yes.
She is on maternity leave. So I'm kind of filling in for her, and myself and Katrina are filling in for her while she's gone. And then we have Esther, who helps with all of our events. She is, when you go on the market, who brings your lock boxes and puts the signs on your house. And Julia is who comes and stages your house. So that is our indispensable operations team.
Absolutely. Couldn't do it without them. All right. Go ahead, Erica.
And then you all should have received an email from me earlier that included the comparative market analysis on your homes. Now, we haven't been in your home, so this is just a really rough estimate. And if you want us to come and really do a consultation with you and get that number more precise, we're more than happy to. And then I sent you an email for our new home valuation system that you can plug into, and it gives you your equity, all sorts of cool things, and upcoming community events. And then we also sent you our recommended vendor sheet. So if you need someone for a chimney or HVAC, all of those resources are on there, as well as if you're thinking of doing some fixing up to your house, some recommended paint colors that go well when we're going to sell that house. And then the no strings attached consultation is just us saying, hey, schedule a quick meeting with us. There'll be no paperwork, no, skin in the game. We'll just sit and answer your questions for you. We did not have a address for the Stanton, so I have that now. So we will make sure we get you a market analysis when this is done and email that over to you.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Erica, if
Yes.
you send it to me, I either don't have it or I'm not smart enough to figure out where it's at.
It should come from Erica at yourhsrgroup.com. I will type that in the chat. And if you cannot find it, again, I will resend it.
Don't forget to check your spam just in case. We are realtors, so the blockers don't like us a whole lot.
There you go. Thank you.
All right. Okay. All right. So we're gonna cover the market update, and then really the bulk of the seminar is going to be on prepping the home, sort of the art of the prep and how important that has become. And then some of the things that have changed maybe since the last time you tried to sell a home. There was a lot of stink in the news about the lawsuit, so we'll cover that a little bit. And then essentially trying to eliminate any complications to a transaction now while you're not selling, so that we're not in a pinch trying to eliminate those complications when we are short on time. Starting with the market, I first wanted to do a 3-year look back, right? So everybody was probably well aware of 2021 and how crazy that was. And sellers were banking big time because we were getting literally 30 to 40 offers on every single one of our listings. The interest rates were at ridiculously low numbers, quote unquote, money was free. And so buyers did not care about overpaying because the interest rate helped to wash that pain away. And as the benefits of that went away and the interest rates started to tick up and the subsidies that they had received from the government started to disappear, we started to see the market shifting. And typically, by definition, anything like about 4 months or more of supply is considered sort of trending the buyer's market. But I would tell you that last year, when Prince William County was right at 2 months, there were times when it spiked, but 2 months of inventory, it very much still felt like a buyer's market and not a seller's market. So by definition, we are still in the seller's market, and we definitely feel like one today because we took a nice drop in inventory here and are starting to tick up. These are the numbers effective 5 March. So it's showing an accumulation of inventory. We're going to talk about that on the next slide on what that means and how it impacts sellers. But I'd hate to predict where this hump lies at the end of 2026, but I don't think it's going to be higher than this. I honestly believe that in Prince William County anyway, because Stafford and Fairfax you would not believe how different those things can be. Prince William County, I believe we saw the worst of it last year. But I think it'll be higher than 2024. So here we go. This graph depicts months of supply. What that means is for all of the homes on the market and based on the buying frequency that is occurring right now, we believe it'll take, in this case, 5 weeks, 1.25 months to go through all the inventory that's sitting here, as long as nothing comes on the market after February and the same number of buyers are out there buying at the same pace. So when we were selling a handful of years ago in the Great Boom, to be able to keep a home on the market for 7 days was a miracle. And if you went to 10 days, if you got in the double digits, people are like, well, what's wrong with the house? I mean, like, what's the problem? because that's how fast everything was going. But the challenge is that this slide, this graph depicts what homes that have gone under contract, how fast they've gone under contract. So at the worst case, they were still under a month, even though the good part of the year, we were 1.5 approaching 2 months in Prince William County. And the reality is that this only evaluates how much time it took for those that got under contract to get under contract, not all of those that are sitting and waiting and still sitting and still waiting and may still be sitting 170, 200 days later because something didn't go right. I'm trying to figure out how Laurel can scribble all over my graphs. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not
Hands
sure.
off the mouse, lady. All right.
I am so sorry. I'm over here trying to move my screen to find Erica's chat. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm writing on her. I'm like, I wonder if anybody else can see that. I'm writing all over you.
And it looks like it's going to continue through the rest of the slides, but that's okay.
I'm so sorry.
normal.
I will try not to do that anymore as I find Erica's.
That's interesting.
Goodness. Yeah. Sorry.
All right. So far, remember, we're still just talking about the volume of activity. And the projections for these forecasting sources indicate in all cases that there's going to be some growth between 2025 and 2026. The best case scenario is the National Association of Realtors. They say 14%. The lowest is realtor.com at 1.7%. And then this is our local MLS. It's a little bigger than Northern Virginia. It goes into some of West Virginia and some of like Pennsylvania and New Jersey, but that's their prediction, and I believe is probably the most hyper local of all of these, because the rest of these are going to be talking about the entire nation. And as you know, our market is nothing like Missouri's and nothing like California's. So I also know that in Prince William County, after reviewing the numbers that we had available to us at the beginning of March, that we're at a 22% growth right now in homes that have gone under contract. So that buyer activity, not the browsers, but the actual like people who are writing contracts. So we're well above even the highest of the predictors for volume, for activity. So now what we all really care about is, okay, great, but how much money am I making year to year to year on my home? For those of you who were homeowners over 2020, 2021, you got a nice big boom. So the market has corrected a bit, but never have we had an entire year where the value depreciated. This market has continued to stay as an appreciation. Now, single family homes and townhomes in Prince William County, those are some slim numbers. Better than a savings account, probably not better than a mutual account, better than some stocks, hard to know, but still a steady pace while you have your shelter in place. And now the predictions for 2026 by a number of these, and I don't remember the source that I pulled this from, but I felt like it was a more
It's keeping current matters
source than this, because this says the average is 1.6, and someplace else I have definitely found that they were showing 2.4% for a nationwide average of appreciation in the homes and a 3.7 for Virginia. But micro markets are where it's at. And Montclair, quite honestly, is one of the higher. I know we have an Ashland family, and I did not look there. Your numbers are a little harder to evaluate in the trends, only because you're only a little over 800 homes, as opposed to Montclair is 4,000 homes. It is sort of statistic worthy, whereas Ashland, it's a little bit harder. but I would suspect it was very similar to Montclair's, and we were, you know, well above the national average. And again, there's micro markets, because there's the homes that were built in the 70s, the homes that were built in the 80s, the 90s, etc. So we all have seen appreciation of some form or another in Montclair as well as Ashland, and I'm certain that's going to continue. So I wanted to show these. I'm going to also have a slide for Ashland, but for Montclair, the active homes, what I wanted to kind of focus in on was cumulative days on market. So there were actually a couple above this that had 0. One was an off-market sale and one was a relocation sale. Do you guys keep seeing this black bar that pops up, or is that just on my screen when I go up here? I don't, because it's blocking, it tends to block the top of
It's
the.
just on your screen.
Okay, good. Anyway, look, Buckingham Court has, these are newer listings. This is 12 days, still good, 14. When you're over at this stage, if you're selling within 2 weeks, it's not too much of a pucker factor. A couple of weekends, especially when people understand that we just went through Snow Creek and some other fun weekends of shoveling. But you get to, for instance, this listing on Brandywine that's showing at 103 days on market. And there's another one below it that's in the 200 days on market. And truth be told, this one right here that says 43, you need to add another 173 to it, because this property tried to sell the better part of last year, never did. And so it's back on the market after a reset from their days on market count. And so they're in the 200s as well. I share this because as we talked in the last slides about that accumulating inventory versus the days on market, these are potentially ones that land in the accumulating inventory and still getting higher and higher in their days on market, as opposed to this slide. These are all some version of a pending sale. They're under contract. And this is from the current market. So we had, that's where the zeros were, 2 zeros, one that was a off-market sale and one that was a relocation sale. So those work a little differently sometimes. And then 2 days on market, 4, 9, then in this form of pending, 3 days on market. But then you're going up to like 30 days. And that's it. That's it. Like those other ones that were sitting at 43 and 108. I'm not sure we're going to see these things ever showing up on a pending listing slide unless things change. And while I won't brag, I will tell you that the majority of these ones that are in single digits are all of our listings. And we want to be able to share how we get those results. One of them isn't. So I'll show how we get the results for our sellers and the things that we do to make sure that you're not sitting in that 200 days. Okay, Ashland, they had no actives and no pendings, so they're waking up now to the market. Again, a smaller population, so it's not surprising that they just are waiting for more of that peak market time frame to list. But look at the variation here. 5 days on market, several single digits. Those are homes that prepped properly and priced properly. And then there's those that did not. And they did eventually close, but I guarantee you they did not close where they were hoping to. This one listed at 679 and ended up closing at 630. What we don't see is if there were any additional closing costs kicked in here. And then this one only dropped by, less than 5,000, so that's not terrible, considering that they listed for 193 days. But they may have kicked back 3,000 in closing costs. That part does not show on a chart in this format. So what we're seeing so far in 2026 is that the Prince William County, I mentioned that before, they're up. They're actually at 22%. So is Montclair. Ashland just hasn't started their market just yet. But the leftover inventory, like that one on Deer Park that I showed you, those repeat listings, if they didn't make changes, 2026 isn't going to help them. Like 2025, told them what they needed to listen to, and if they didn't make changes as they relisted with a new, fresh 0 days on market, they're gonna experience the same thing. Because buyers still have options, and buyers still are gonna have inventory that continues to accumulate while they nab the ones that they've been waiting for, and ones that make them happy. It's a skills-based market, and that's really where we're gonna talk about bulk of the rest of the seminar, is how you home prep and price strategically in order to get that success. And I throw this in here because it's sometimes hard to understand, but new roofs are great, new water heaters are great, new HVACs are great. Phones matter, but lipstick sells, and that's because eventually buyers buy with emotion. And they don't get excited about, architectural shingle and composite roofing and HVACs. They get excited about the flashy tile and the beautiful quartz and the hardwood floors and things like that. So those are things that while you're considering selling, you might want to, factor that in. And that's one of the things that we do in our. I'm going backwards. What happened? That's one of the things that we factor into that no strings attached offer, is that we just come in and we talk to you about things that we might consider doing. I want to share a case study. These are both of our listings. Both of these homes, one on Shadowwood, one on Rincon, were very similar in square footage. They both had front porches, back decks. 4743 Shadowwoods, built in 1985, is a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath. It had 2247 above grade. Let me explain that one time just so that you understand. All appraisers start with above grade square footage. In your tax record, it evaluates square footage completely different. They don't even tax our below grade square footage. So where this door is, this plus this equals all your above grade. Anything that they might have finished below or present but unfinished below is below grade square footage, and could be below grade unfinished or below grade finished. And even if you have a walkout basement and there's a door and tons of natural light that's straight out, it does not matter. It's based on the front door, and that's it. I tried to win that argument one time with an appraiser, and it did not fly. So this home had updates. The kitchen was decently updated, new appliances, did have granite counters, they had painted the cabinets, replaced, these aren't the original cabinet, I mean, these are the original cabinets, but they replaced the hardware, painted, and did a pretty decent refresh. And then their bathrooms were really stellar, to be honest, as 1980s homes go. They had gutted them and done some really nice work. You can't see it in this picture, but it's a vaulted ceiling with a skylight. So natural light in the hall bath, that's always nice too. And one of the things that is a plus in Montclair is a flat, usable backyard. Honestly, in all of it, Ashland has the same thing. There's homes where the backyards look like you could, put a chairlift in it. And then there's homes that have nice, flat, usable, put a swing set and a trampoline and maybe extend the patio and have an outdoor kitchen. Very usable. So that's a premium for listings. It does tend to give us a little bit of an edge in getting your home sold. They were under contract in 4 days. They had 3 offers. Actually, the escalation was 35,000 over list, but we could not use the full escalation because of the way the escalation addendum works. And so they ended up with something with 16,500 over. And more importantly to most sellers is that there are essentially no contingencies. Yes, they have a financing, they're getting a loan, so there is an innate financing contingency that they retained. They could have waived it, but they didn't. But we talked to the lender and we're completely comfortable. They added an appraisal gap, so if this wouldn't appraise for the 615.15, that we would have that 16.5 to make up the difference. They would not be able to void out a contract or ask the seller to reduce. And they did no inspections. that is such a relief because the sellers just always hold their breath until the inspections come through and wonder what they're gonna get asked to fix. Rincon, it's not a bad news story, but it is not as good as what Shadow Woods did. And in some respects, you would have expected Rincon, just based on these stats that you're seeing on the slide, to have performed better. It had a 4-bedroom, 2.5, just the same as the other one. While it only had 2156 above grade, it had a finished lower level. So their total finished square feet was 2728. And while appraisers may not value that square footage as much below grade, and I'll tell you, it's a 1/10 difference. So whatever they're evaluating your above grade square footage at, they're going to give you per square foot 1/10 of that for the below grade. Unless they give you like some finishes updates, like, oh wow, they got a theater, we'll give them some extra, things like that. This one had a sloped yard that if you can envision, the house behind them was higher than that. So the house, drainage was potentially coming down and it had no usable space other than the beautiful deck that they built into essentially the surrounding terrain. On the flip side, this is not true. This was carryover. The smaller main level for traditional colonials was for Shadow Woods, and that's because they had more space built out over their garage. Most of our homes, you look around in Montclair, they didn't use above garage space until you get into the homes that were built in the 90s. So, but it did have mostly carpet, like carpet. It was a primarily carpet. When you can get hardwood or a good laminate, and those laminates out there sometimes are tough to tell that they're not hardwood. Those will definitely be appreciated by the buyer and more willing to make those upticks in their price. They ended up going under contract in 21 days. They only got the one offer, and of course, they felt compelled to work with that contract after sitting on 21 days, which in many markets is not all that long, but people are just having a really hard time understanding that once you get past a week or two, that it's not something that just suggests that there's something wrong with the house. For the bathroom renovations, I mean, here is a typical Montclair 80s home bathroom with a very small tub, toilet, sink, and then this nondescript sort of dressing room thing that we have in our bedrooms, that some people even have sinks like in their bedrooms, and that's a bit of a detractor. They did net their list price because they got a contract for $645 that they're giving $10,000 back for its closing costs. And there are no way contingencies, so we're still in holding breath mode at this point for what's going to be coming in on the home inspection. So that is, we're not talking about 180 days or 200 days on market, but still the difference between somebody who did some of that renovation and prep and got 3 offers to choose from, an opportunity to have no inspections, no appraisal, and escalate over their list price, versus one that didn't do all of that and still got sold for their list price. Jury's still out on whether or not this will all hold together after an inspection and a negotiation of inspection repairs, but not necessarily the best position to be in. So you've heard it before, and I'm not going to spend tons of time on declutter, but it is the one thing that we truly require team sport mentality here, because I can't go in and go through your stuff and delegate what goes to Goodwill and what goes to your kids and what goes to the trash. You have to be able to make those decisions for yourself. The decluttering becomes very personal, and a good part of my team could share some stories about some of the homes that we have all come in to help declutter. We do charge by the hour, but one of our sellers broke her leg right before we were starting the process, and she couldn't move. So she sat on a bed and we just kept holding things up. which pile, which pile, which pile, and we went through so much, and then before you know it, we're hearing the story of, oh, that was off of my first date, that's when I, did this is when I graduated from medical school, like all these things. And so it's time consuming and hard for somebody else to come in and do a lot of that for you. So just a warning. Obviously less is more. There's a company that we work with, Able Moving, that offers a storage pod for a very, very reasonable price for up to 2 months. So if you wanted to use that as an opportunity to buy yourself more time, send it all into the pod, and we will figure out what stuff goes to Johnny and what stuff goes to Sally at a later date, but at least it's out of the house and we can move forward. And then one of the things that we do very well, and this is just, this is a DIY seminar, but you have to consider how cameras perceive your home and how buyers are going to walk through your home. That has to be flowable. And so there's a lot of maybe eliminating some furniture or moving furniture to a different place to facilitate that. Let's talk about repairs and renovation. Oh, why does it keep going backwards on me? Here we go. This is really, pretty self-descriptive. These are photos off of the MLS in our market. And this is how one home is depicted. And this is how the other home is. This isn't the super fancy kitchen. I mean, it's really tile floor, decent enough appliances in either case, but it's the counter space, the appropriately placed things. And this isn't our listing, so I'm not necessarily just calling out all of our listings. This is would never be a listing. Then how about this one? So there really isn't clutter per se, but boy, is that a lot to look at on a picture. And you are not going to get a showing appointment unless someone clicks on it and says, "Ooh, I want to see that." And this is probably one of those swipe kind of photos. I also know, because I sold this home previously, that where this space is how you would want to enter this room. So this is a catastrophic no-no in that they've got 3 gigantic pieces of furniture here. This room is the only living space in this house because it does not have a lower level. It's on a slab, and you come through the front door and you want to go in, but you can't. So you got to go back into the kitchen and come back around between this chair and this couch to get into your living room. So that's never a position you want to put your buyers in. This is, okay, everybody has some things that are super important to them. We had a seller who hid these little hide and seek dolls all over her house. They were scary as crap. And we wanted her to take them down, and she absolutely refused because to her they were good luck. They were part of her person. And this house did not sell. And when she eventually relisted with someone else, those dolls were not there. And that was a good decision. There's other things that I can think of, tons and tons of quilts that, grandma made and great grandma made, and they're on display. We don't need all that stuff because people don't have the same sentimental attachment to things that you have. And it's time to just put those in your beautiful chest for keepsakes or whatever. Staging is something we feel so critical of that we have our own staging inventory. We have 2 warehouses, or at least 2 large storage rooms, and a warehouse of stuff. And we do it complimentary because I know how much of a difference it makes. And I want this to be something that you say, let's not put the money towards that. Let's do something different, or let's save that for negotiation. This is getting you to the point where you get multiple offers over list and you don't have to worry. And especially, I hear Renee, who's my lead listing agent, say this all the time. We don't have to put money into this section of the home for renovations, paint, flooring, whatever, because we believe our staging is going to overcome it. Our staging can make a space. These are crisscrossed, but this was the way it was listed originally. This is the way that it listed after we were allowed to stage. This is a catastrophic mistake. This was a lakefront home, and she had her bed in front of the lake views. This is looking out into a neighbor's house. So when we were finally allowed to stage, when she sat on the market for 120 days, and it did not sell on the lake. This was a few years ago. But when we were allowed, when she finally had to move to her new destination, we were allowed to stage, of course. She moved her things out, and this is where we put the bed. Now you could walk in and you could see the lake, you could see the deck, you could appreciate everything that this house had to offer. You could walk into this room as opposed to not. And you could feel a little bit more open in the living room spaces here. So what we did is called all the people that had shown it before and did not give us an offer. And they came back and they looked, and ultimately one of the families, we ended up in a bidding war, ironically, 4 months after being listed, and sold for over the list price because they thought it was an entirely new home, and we had done nothing except take her stuff out and minimize what we put back in. Vacant, you would think, oh great, well, why don't I just do vacant? You can, that is not a good idea. First of all, they don't necessarily like this. What is this? I mean, I see a light that kind of looks like it should go over a dining room table, but I also see a washing machine, so I'm confused. You should be. So we would have staged this with a table. We also would not have taken a picture with that door open, but that was not our photo. These spaces are a little hard to know exactly how I use it, because this is their primary suite. There's a lot of these models and they're great, but some people don't, you know, do I make this an office? Oh man, I work at night, my husband sleeps during the day, how do I, you know, like, what am I gonna do here? There's this, which is really just like, I don't understand the scale. If I took this on Shadow Woods and I took this vacant on Rincon, you would think it's the same room. One easily fits 2 couches or a couch and a love seat and a chair. The other one is gonna fit a couch and nothing else. But you wouldn't know that unless you get that scale identified here. It just gives people an understanding. Think about if I had taken a picture here without this furniture, I wouldn't have known, oh, there's a whole area here in front of the fireplace that's plenty big, and then another separate area here that I could have as a game room or put my bar there or something like that. A lot of people had a hard time understanding this house, how they would use the space. Because it's one of the tiny houses that we have in the neighborhood, and it has a loft, and we staged it in a way that it made a lot of sense, and we got multiple offers very quickly on that home. So I think I had a writer there. I think there was something I wanted to say about it that I don't really remember, other than it sat on the market unstaged. When they brought it back on after leaving it off for a while, they had done a little bit of renovation, but also staged the primary photo. So you didn't see the outside of the house anymore. You saw the inside of a virtually staged home, and that helped to tip the scales, I think, in attracting new buyers into considering that home. But it sat on the market for over 200 days and ended up selling. And Renee, do you remember, was it like not 80,000 or 90,000 below their original list? Something in that neighborhood. But if they had
I can't remember.
Yeah, I think my banner was really like, if they had started with the process that we're about ready to show you, that would not have been the case. They would have been able to sell for their, she listed, I think, at $939. We might have listed it at $899, because there's some strategic pricing that we're also going to talk about. But ultimately, she ended up taking a 70 to $90,000 hit, because she saved the renovations for round 2, and she never really did staging. Wingman Partnerships is a program that we offer. So I talk about all these renovations, and it's like, Yeah, right, Meg, but I don't have that kind of money right now. I mean, I'll have it, have the money in the house, but I don't have it sitting in a bank account. Wingman Partnerships is something that we developed when I was starting to take expired listings, and that's exactly what I heard from the sellers. I said, the reason that your house hasn't been selling, and I'm the third realtor that's trying to sell it, is because you have all red carpet everywhere throughout the house. So I want to change the carpet. I have no money. The last realtor wanted me to do this, the realtor before that wanted me to do that, and they didn't sell the house, so I can't. So I came up with a plan to be able to do that on behalf of sellers so that we could make those strategic updates. Has to be a multiplier of return on investment. You don't put 10,000 in to get 10,000 out. Put 10,000 in to get 15 or 20 out. So, or more sometimes. And so we pay it up front. We agree on the price. It's well below market price because it's our own people doing the work. And we control their calendars, we manage the project, and we also keep the prices to a place where 100% return on investment is like a minimum barrier. And then ultimately, we don't take any money until the home sells because we're so confident that it will sell. That we just take it out of your proceeds once you sell. So here is a case of one where we took a lakefront home after it had already sat on market. This was originally listed in the middle of June, which is a relatively good time for the market. For lakefronts, there is not necessarily a heavy season because there's few enough of them that when they become available, no matter what month of the year, it's not as important as those that are, would have another 20 homes in the neighborhood that could potentially compete with them. So 15 June was a good time. They listed it at 939,999. And you'll see some pictures that I have from the previous listing, and then ultimately just canceled after 104 days on market with 2 price drops that had gotten down to this price. We got it at the end of September, and Renee took this listing here. This is a before, this is an after. I guess I reversed it. Because this is a before, this is an after, and this is a before, this is an after. And then there's another set of slides. But we brought our crews in for a very reasonable price and changed the purple cabinets to something that was a little bit more appealing to a broader buyer pool. Reduced took out the purple walls and put it to something neutral that people can see themselves in and choose to change later if they want. Wallpaper comes off, and actually some of the furniture and the bedding comes off. This is the same bed, but it looks much more appealing in this Julia staged version. And then even here, I mean, it was really just changing some paint and getting rid of the blue carpet, putting a nice fresh neutral colored carpet. And then this is sort of like, the one thing that they didn't want to move to their new house because it's old and dated and probably sat on it, would fall through it. I don't know. So we needed to eliminate that from the main level attractive photo. This is your family room right off the kitchen. So it's a space that's where people want to see themselves living, and replaced it with a little bit more, to date chairs. Here's another example of the house, all the befores, all the afters. And really the fact that we did all of that work plus repaired their deck and repaired a plumbing thing that occurred in part because they had left the home vacant for 100+ days, and did all of that in, I think we've got the budget here. Yep. 14,300 in less than 2 weeks. We were back on the market in a little over 2 weeks after all that was done and all of our marketing. So I personally believe that if all of that had been done, this home probably would have been able to sell for 925, possibly as high as 950 in the rate market, because the first impression wouldn't have been, the first impression would have been, wow, this is like move-in ready. Oh, I have $36 days. I'm so used to putting dollars on. So it's never too early for a consultation, because there's things that you think you need to do that we're gonna tell you you don't need to waste your time on. And then there's things that you think are gonna be too expensive, but after you looked at that bill, you probably wouldn't have thought that you could have done that all for about 14K. And we did it for you at our expense, and all they had to do for them, and all they had to do was pay us back when we sold our house, which we did in 36 days. Things to consider before you sell are that, as you can see, fresh paint goes a long way. Contiguous flooring is important. So as you're looking to do updates in your home, try to eliminate seams. If you can do hardwood throughout the whole main level, that's something we write about, sometimes put in boldface, because it's such an attractive feature of a home. And then your money-making spaces are your kitchen, your primary suite, bathrooms, of course, but especially the primary bathroom. We can work around not updated hall baths and not updated powder rooms. Spacious basement, so don't chop that up into the office, the bedroom, the this, the that, you're better off having more open space, but a legal bedroom is always nice. And then outdoor living space, people love being outdoors. And that is a place that they want to feel like they don't have to go add a lot of stuff to make it something they can enjoy. Here's a couple of examples that I just want to share, because these were things that people could have made small changes, but didn't consult us first. We didn't know these people, but at the time, had we had the opportunity to get in here, we would have told this family, you're making these fabulous updates to your kitchen and family room, which the family room is on this side of the camera, and you've got this little space of hallway, and in between two carpeted rooms, your dining room and your living room, or maybe it was reversed, I can't remember. And it was very distressed wood, because this was a 1980s home. The previous owners had likely had pets, these guys actually didn't, but a lot of damage to the hardwood floors. So we had to put a rug here, we had to put a rug here, and that just broke up what could have been a lovely entry, would be looking into nice fresh hardwood floors all the way back to the updated kitchen. And this home struggled to sell. And there were a couple reasons. One was just the model, and those are things they can't fix, but this was a thing that they could have fixed for probably $1,200 max. Like I bet it wouldn't have cost any more to run this wood into here. This was a fairly expensive kitchen remodel that they did, and this home was full, much like the last one I showed, of very individualistic improvements. They had like black painted tin on the dining room, living room ceilings. They had some interesting things in the basement that before they could sell, they ultimately had to take out and literally refloor a room down there. But this is, in fact, bubblegum paint kitchen cabinets. And Renee represented the buyer on this and got them a slam dunk of a deal on a lakefront home, because these people had made some unfortunate choices and ultimately sat on market for the better part of a year, making multiple price drops, waiting for someone who wanted black tin ceilings and bubblegum cabinets.
They also didn't really prep for sale. I mean, in addition to some of the like real custom choices in there, they hadn't finished their paint job. They had like patched the walls to paint, but they hadn't finished it, and they kind of threw it up on the market like that. And they had intended to change out the carpet, but they just like didn't get around to it. And so there was like stains, animal stains on the carpet upstairs, and they hadn't like tidied up their wood pile in the back, and they had some broken steps going down to the lake, and just like the general like prep for market that we always, review with folks, Meg, they just, it looked like they had basically packed their things and then kind of put the sign in the yard. And unfortunately, it just didn't work for them, but we kept giving them help over the time, and over time they slowly started fixing things and fixing things, but their price just kept dropping, 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 and the buyers bought it far below market value, unfortunately, for those sellers.
Yeah. This is the last one I'll show you. This was just another one of those if we could have consulted, and I'm not really sure what these people were thinking, but they have carpet in their family room and they have hardwood in their entry and kitchen. And this was a sliding glass door. This door, of course, is somewhat, obscured by the table that sits where the eating space in the kitchen is. And so the kids were tracking in and out of the yard and outdoor spaces through the carpet. I don't fully understand what they were thinking, but they chose to, instead of replace the carpet with hardwood, which wouldn't have been anywhere near the price of a gigantic picture window the size of a sliding glass door, so that their kids couldn't go in and out. They now were selling a home that the only way out to this deck was beautiful. It was huge. It was ran the entire width of the house, and it was the showpiece of the home, in my opinion. But you had to go around the table and chairs to get to it. And at this stage, the carpet still looks pretty dingy anyway, so it didn't save a whole lot. So I guess what I can say is, we love to consult with you and tell you ways that we might think around a problem based on the hundreds of homes that we've sold and the thousands of buyers that we've come across to help solve a problem that you don't know quite what to do, and likely can help you save money, and if not save it all in the renovation, certainly save it in your equity. So early consultations, I know I've been plugging that a bit. Believe me, our consults are free. We don't mind coming into your home and seeing all of the things that you'd like to show us and helping you problem solve. We did this with this family. And the goal of it at the time was to obtain what their make me sell price really was, and also to understand what they were going to be looking for, a dream home, which in this case was what we refer to as a unicorn. Like, when it comes up, it's not going to come back for a long, long time. And we Renee mostly created a listing prep plan to include contractor estimates from our wingman team of what it would cost to do that. And the goal was to give them something that they could start working through now, so that when unicorn showed up, or when the market came to a point where the make me sell price was reasonably attainable, that we could go quickly. And that is exactly what happened. I honestly don't recall. I guess it was probably 1.5 to 2 years between the consult and when we actually hit market. Is that right, Renee?
Yeah, it was at least a year and a half.
Yeah, but it happened. The home next door listed, it was almost identical, except it didn't have this amazing backyard that these guys had. And it had multiple offers and sold for the make me sell price of 1.3 million that these people had wanted. The market was climbing. We had reached out to them to say, hey, I think that we might be coming, where are you at on our checklist of listing prep? And then we started energizing the group, brought our team in to start getting this home prepped. And at the same time, Renee was able to, within 2 weeks, get it marketed and get it under contract. And the unicorn shows up, which was perfect timing. And this beautiful home on acreage, their mid-century modern updated home, is exactly what they've been waiting for. Renee was able to negotiate a fantastic sales price of 65K under list because that home had sat at the wrong price, and we didn't even know it was out there until they dropped the price, and now it suddenly became visible to the people who were gonna buy it. And that's when we're gonna segue into strategic pricing in a minute, but that's exactly why we talk about where you strategically price on our pricing pyramid. Because the person who's gonna buy your home is potentially not seeing it just yet if you don't price right. And ultimately, because we primed the pump to sell their house, we got it through any kind of inspection contingencies that might have occurred, so that we didn't have to have a home sale contingency on this house, which might have made a difference between us being able to get our buyers this home at such a great price or not. To be able to come in without a home sale contingency meant that a lot less risk to the sellers, and ultimately we were able to show them that this was gonna go to the closing table. Here's one last thing that I just wanna share with you. Renee and I were talking, this may not be as much of a negative as it was before, but do
Sure.
understand that when you put solar panels on your home, you are doing this through a loan of some sort, right? These panels, I generally see them between $30,000 and $50,000. So now you've got a $30,000 to $50,000 lien against your home, and you're paying a $200 a month or $250 a month or whatever it is on that lien. That's a 20-year lien. And now you are trying to sell your house. So you are trying to get a banner price from a buyer. And on top of that, they need to add another 30 to 50,000 of debt onto what they're going to need to mortgage to buy your house. So your options are either they do qualify and the extra 200 or 250 or whatever your monthly payment on that solar panel price is still qualifiable for a lender and manageable for the buyer. Or you are going to be forced to pay off the balance of the panels at settlement. And I have yet to see a home that sold for a price that fully absorbed that loan. I've seen some pay off, but unfortunately it wasn't like, oh, here's my list price of 700 and I'm getting 740 because I also am giving them $40,000 worth of solar panels. It's not going to happen. So just keep that in mind if you're considering this. I will say with prices of utilities, if you're staying in your house a while, it may not be a bad thing. But if you think you're selling in the next, 5 to 10, I probably wouldn't do it. Things that win the buyers over, some are things that we can address with objections, and some of these we can't. One of the things that helps us overcome other objections are just to find a couple of really special spaces. So let's say I have that house on Rincon with the vertical backyard. But if I had done a great theater room or a really nice wet bar or an outdoor kitchen on that deck, that probably would have helped to overcome a lot of the objections, which came from one of two things. The basement wasn't walk up or walk out, it was fully enclosed, and the backyard really wasn't usable in their minds. Those were the two things that these buyers could not have fixed. It's possible that something's extra special someplace else gets them to forget about those objections, and we do play with that sometimes as well. All right, now we're going into the pricing discussion. So imagine this pyramid is each of these white lines represents a natural rate in a search parameter. So we think of search parameters the same way we think of monies. They go in increments of 25. You don't search for 500 to 622. You search for 500 to 6 or 500 to 625 or 650. So the same thing goes when you want to stay visible. So let's say your market value is 650 and it sits right here. The person that's looking is looking at 650 or potentially 649.9, but for the most part, they're taking the easy type route and they're picking 650. And in fact, a lot of the search parameters in the like Zillows and Redfins, they have drop downs. So you don't get to custom pick, you pick one of their numbers. So it's gonna be a round number like that. But, and if you priced up here, you lost 15% of your visible buyers because this is looking for people who are really at 650 to 7. Reality is that many buyers are willing to come here. I didn't really hone in on the last bullet of the last slide, but it's emotion sells. Emotion is what ultimately brings the contract, and especially those strong contracts where they're willing to waive appraisal, they're willing to waive the home inspections. They're willing to go up in price or put in an escalation addendum. It's because they came to Shadow Woods and they saw a line out the door for people trying to come in, or an open house that had 15 people wandering around. And so they knew they had to come in strong. So, and the buyer's agent gave them recommendations to say, you can come in at list price, but we may want to add an escalation, or we may want to waive some of the things that matter most to the seller. We may want to change the date of the closing to be more competitive to what they need. Those kinds of things drive the offers up. This is a tool also that we have. This was actually a benchmark report that I pulled for one of our clients who insisted on being listed here, even though the median in her neighborhood and with her style and size of home was over here. If we had listed at 500, perhaps we could have walked to 525 with some exciting staging, renovations, marketing, all the things. But clearly the market is telling this seller that this is a big ask. That's a big ask. And then this is the other one. This shows us the showing demographics. So based on $10,000 increments, 790 to 799.9. This was a different house, a different client, but we were talking about a price drop at this point, and I'm actually going to go through this a little bit more in depth. This was significantly more showings if we would have tucked under the 800 number than if, and I'm certain that the people who were showing here were looking at homes that were priced up to 800. Their search parameters said up to 800. So this is just the way the graph rolls out. 800 to 809, that little bit over, is getting less. And if we had potentially started early enough at this number, we might not have ended up with the same results that we did end up with. This was a Hope Hill home, so it's off of Springs and Meadville. It's in the Colvin School District, which is a high value location. And it was 5-bed, 4.5 bath, finished lower level. So there were a lot of good things. And when we met her, she already had a signed listing agreement with another agent, but they had a bit of a falling out. Her listing agreement said that they were going to list this for $875, and there was absolutely no reasonable comp that could come anywhere close to that. We did find some comps that could support $825, and trying to get her out of the eights would have been probably not possible. And so we did our very best to try and get her traction at $825, but she did not agree to do all of the recommended improvements. She chose to do a carpet credit. For anybody who thinks a carpet credit works, I'm here to tell you, I've been in this business 13 years and sold over 600 homes just in Prince William County alone, and that does not work. They have to be able to see something fresh and clean that they can move in on, even if they tear it up and put hardwood in the day they move in. Don't be offended. It got you the price you wanted and the timeline that you needed, and you weren't sitting on the market for 200 days. So also she wasn't willing to do the professional cleaning. This woman was extremely busy, and keeping her house clean was really not her priority, unfortunately, and so that was one of our feedback items that we continued to get from buyers and buyer agents. She did hit the market at the end of August, and we had very low showings in part because of her lack of availability. She was one of the people who was in charge of closing out the fiscal year for the Department of Defense, Department of War. And so September is a tough month for her. And she was working from home. And so there were a lot of showings that she denied. That did not help. So the bottom line is the majority of the objections were things she couldn't fix. She definitely could have made it more available to buyers, but we couldn't make her basement a legal egress, and we couldn't change the downward slope of her backyard and the lack of privacy because she backed to other homes. So we knew we had to course correct quickly, and I pulled out my chart, and here's where her home was listed, and here's where we recommended it drop to. It would have been a $25,000 drop, but we would have gone to 4x the number of showings and buyers that we were exposing it to. We also looked at everything that had gone on the market at the same time she did that was a comparable sale, either in her neighborhood or directly in a neighborhood adjacent in the Colgan School District. And every single one of them had done price drops. I called the ones that were under contract. Every single one of them was accepting contracts below 800 or had reduced the price to below 800. But in the meantime, they actually all had walk-up basements, and that in that particular neighborhood, there's a lot of multi-generational family use. It's becoming more popular across everywhere, but certainly in Oak Hill we see it a lot. And so that extra access to the basement is important for a large majority of the buyers. She did do a small price reduction, but it didn't get that price, that pyramid, it didn't get over the white line. So it did nothing for her. We had no impact. And at this point, now we are solidly in government shutdown. This is October, and we are struggling to get the buyers that were on the hook to even want to make a move because they're not getting a paycheck now and they don't know when they're gonna get a paycheck. At 63 days on market, she finally did agree to move the home into that new bracket. We got 2 offers within about 3 days. We actually encouraged her to stay on for a second weekend to give it a little bit more time. But at this point, because she was already under contract for her new build and the builder had been giving her so much pressure, she elected to accept one of those offers at $750. It was a cash offer, it didn't have contingencies. That was certainly a positive in her mind and a relief for her. But the lack of we picked up on needing to react in 2 weeks, and I think that we could have got her a lot more, but it took us another 2 months to get her, or nearly 2 months to get her to follow our lead. And as soon as she did, she got 2 offers, but they were lowball offers because she had such high days on market. I'm totally changing topics. I mean, no lead in here. We're just going right into it. How many, by a show of hands, how many have heard of the Mars settlement? The settlement with the buyers. Great. So Brent has heard of it. For a couple of years, there were lawsuits that were brewing about the fact that when we used to take a listing, the listing agent would negotiate a compensation that paid a total amount to sell the home. Part of that was advertised in the MLS. There was a separate column for it that was visible to anybody and everybody getting something from the MLS that would see how much that buyer agent was going to be paid by the seller for bringing the buyer with the ready, willing, and able buyer that they accepted a contract from. And that became not allowed in August of 2024. So what we do now is if we're gonna take a listing agreement with the seller, we negotiate compensation only for the listing broker. So only what the listing broker is going to charge to do all the things that I've just been describing. plus negotiate and get it to closing. And then the buyers sign a buyer representation agreement with their agent and they agree on compensation. There is a section, at least in the Virginia buyer's agent agreement, that says, I, buyer, allow my agent to ask the seller to pay for some or all of this compensation. And I can promise you that every single one of them clicks yes. So any seller compensation to the buyer agent is now incorporated into a purchase offer. This is the first page of any offer that comes to you. Here's your sales price. I needed $650. I see that you're putting 20% down. You're doing a conventional loan. I'm not going to ask. I am not going to ask for any closing costs, or maybe I'm gonna, because we are seeing that in some cases. But I am going to ask for seller payment towards buyer broker compensation, and inevitably, the vast majority put 3% there. Even though when we were doing this, visible in the MLS, that was typically 2.5%. And then depending on the situation, we can negotiate that down. The seller can negotiate it down. But here were my 2025 transactions based on 87 sales last year. 70% of those transactions, the seller paid 2.5%. 11%, they paid more than 2.5%. And then 18% of the transactions, they paid less. There was only one transaction out of 87 where the seller did not have to pay the buyer agent fees. But that was an investor who typically pays his buyer agent out of the fact that she got him a deal, right? She got him a home for $300,000 that might have typically been $400,000 or $375,000 or something. So, and we do 4 or 5 sales a year with that investor. So, and the bottom line is, nothing really changed. It comes about in a different way, but in the end, the seller is still budgeting, needs the budget for the full 5.5 to 6. I would say 5.5 is a reasonable number to budget against, and compensation. All right, these are just a couple of little things that we talk about, like, should I do a pre-sale home inspection? In the case of that one house that sat for 21 days, we recommended that they did that. We knew that there was a lot of deferred maintenance on that house, and we wanted him. He was very reticent about surprises. That was something that was, his biggest concern is, I put money into a home and then I get these other big surprises, and now you're going to ask me to fix all these really tough things. And that's absolutely understandable. So we recommend a home inspection in that case. There's a couple of things that we do typically see. At a minimum, you should probably, if you have a wood burning fireplace, i.e. chimney, you should have somebody come in and do that one. But you don't necessarily need to do a whole full home inspection unless you believe there's a lot of deferred maintenance. Because how many times do you go in your crawl space? How many times do you go in your attic? Those are things that if the home inspection comes back and it says evidence of rodents, maybe it's not a rodent that's been in there in the last 20 years, but you didn't do a home inspection, or you didn't check that, or you were okay with it because it was in the attic and you had no intention of going up. And now you have somebody who's allergic to them. We've run into that. People who are deathly afraid of them. That would be me. And so they might walk away from that house simply because it used to be there. And then doing an audit of insurance claims. That's something that you can do with your insurance company. But we did run into a situation where 15 years prior, a seller had a kitchen sink leak that went into their basement. They fixed the sink piping. They fixed the whole ceiling. There was zero evidence of it, and he did make a claim on it. The insurance company fixed it, and it was 15 years later that he listed it, and we almost lost that deal because for whatever reason, this particular seller or buyer rather could not get an insurance company to cover it unless we would go in and validate that there was no more polybutylene piping anywhere in the house, which was an absurd expectation because you have to open up the walls to even do that. And this guy, fortunately, this buyer really wanted the house. And so he went to a non-traditional insurance option to be able to go forward with the mortgage. But that would have probably kicked out an average buyer in a heartbeat, because if you can't get insurance, then you can't get a mortgage, and if you can't get a mortgage, it's really hard to buy a house. Radon, for those of you who don't know, it's the number 2 contributor to lung cancer in the United States, and about a third, I'd say 20 to 30% of our homes have it in Montclair, and in this whole general area, Ashland, the whole thing. So do I recommend that you get it done prior to an inspection? No, not really. I don't, because you're gonna pay a few hundred to do an inspection, and you're gonna have to mitigate it no matter what. If they do it during their inspection, they're gonna ask you to mitigate it because it's now disclosable. It now hits a threshold of something that's mandatorily disclosed to any buyer. So you're gonna fix it anyway, and it costs about $1,200 to $1,500 to fix. So, but if you're staying in the house for a while, and this is just, I'm here to get information and I'm not selling for 10 years or until you carry me out in the box, you may want to have your radon tested, because it is serious. And if you tested for radon when you bought the home and it was before 2011, that changed the dynamic significantly. And every year there's changes to the fissures in the earth, and it moves around. It's a living organism, and radon can seep through that. You could have it, your neighbor could not have it, or vice versa. It happens all the time. WDI is wood destroying insect, and a WDI inspection, or also known as a termite inspection, is something that most buyers are asking for, not all. Some lenders like the VA require it. And the thing that I need to tell you about here is if you had had termites treated in the past, if you or they did not go back and remove all the evidence of it, those little like mud huts that they build, the tubes, then it's gonna just come up as an inspection that needs to be remediated. And if the remediation was more than 5 years ago, you're gonna spend thousands of dollars to perimeter treat your home for termites that potentially were killed 20 years ago and never came back, because all they are going to say is there's evidence, and no lender is going to approve that loan until you treat it. So if you do happen to know, especially if it happens in garages and like unfinished places in the basement, that you had termites, go look at the report and try to figure out where they found the evidence, where they're circling the evidence, and go make sure that the mud huts were taken off, so that you don't have an unnecessary expense here. The bottom line is Virginia is actually a non-disclosure state, also referred to as a buyer beware state. And we do not have the burden of disclosure for too many, you sellers do not have the burden of disclosure for too many things. But if you do a home inspection, then you share the entire home inspection with an agent, they unfortunately have a different barrier of disclosure, and it becomes a little more challenging to negotiate that. So the right thing at this stage then becomes, we need to fix all these anything that's wouldn't otherwise be easily observable, like situation in the attic, a situation in a crawl space, something inside a wall, whatever, something like that couldn't be easily detected has to be disclosed. Okay, one of the things that you might consider as a home warranty, people have different opinions of this. Some people think they're a joke. I like them. I keep them on my homes, keep them on my mom's home, my kids' homes. We work with United Home Warranty primarily because we know the CEO, we know the East Coast Regional Vice President, And if we're not happy with their answers, they want our business because we put it on every listing and we put it at our expense, every listing, and then for all of our buyers at our expense. So they listen to us. So if you guys are thinking of a home warranty, I recommend United Home Warranty and tell them that Honorable Service Realty told them all of you. Homeowners associations, we're all in them. Please reconcile your property improvements early. Renee just had one this week that they said we got approval for all of our updates. We went through the HOA. Well, they may have, but they've been like, they were like a nearly plank owner of that house in this neighborhood. And the HOAs turn over, and sometimes the records are maintained and sometimes they aren't. So
They need 6 PIRs, 6 of them.
they need 6 improvement requests with neighbors
Yeah.
signed and all of the description of the improvements and all of the things, and they are sitting on an offer that, you know, I don't know if they want to close in 30 days or 45 or whatever, but the reality is that's not a lot of time because you have to wait for the covenants committee to meet, and then you gotta wait in some cases for the board to meet. And you're trying to do that all within the time of going under contract and closing. That might not be within your control. It really might not. So please, some property management companies will even do a courtesy inspection and come out to your house and tell you what they would write up so you can fix all those things. But at a minimum, you can get what's on the record and do a cross check to make sure that there isn't something that you've done that they don't have record of.
And I will say, Ashland has the weirdest requests to the Ashland family that is in here. I have some wonderfully funny stories about the things they've asked for on their documents. So I can help you plan ahead and, you know, kind of get that ahead of time.
Yeah, I second that. I grew up in Ashland, and when we went to sell my dad's home, it's like some of the things he was dinged on. It's like, really? So
Super weird.
Yeah. Appraisals, we'll just talk really quickly about that. We already talked about what about
Meg, Karen, did you mean to
Oh,
raise your hand?
yeah. Hi, I just have a question on the homeowners. So you're talking about stuff like, for an instant, they came around and gave us a ticket because we needed to do our driveway, which was like $8,000, which we did. Is that the kind of stuff? Or are you talking about stuff
So
you do?
anything, so in 20 years, if you added a deck to the back that wasn't there before, or you chose to paint the deck the color that they don't have listed on your PIR, they're gonna ask you to put in a PIR, get the neighbors to sign off on your green deck or your planter beds or fence or
Front door.
changes in windows, like the grate, you know, the grids. Some people took the grids out.
Oh,
all
so
those things.
like I should go because we're, looking now until next spring. I need to do this now. Should I do this now? Put something into the homeowners? Because I don't know. We bought our house from our parents, and they added on and did stuff, so I have no
Right,
idea.
so, yeah, I mean, the driveway, the fact that it's a nice driveway as opposed to one that they wrote up before, that doesn't need a PIR. What needs a PIR is a change to the exterior visuals of the home. So if you changed any colors, if you add.
Well, we got all that approved before we did all that stuff, like redid the siding and all that, so that
Right,
stuff is okay.
And so I would just go say, I want to see my folder to see.
Okay.
My file to see if you got everything. Because, actually First Services has been the.
Right, because they've changed they've changed. When we originally bought the house, it was different.
It was different, yeah.
It was different. Yeah,
Anyway,
so.
Reconciling makes sense. It's
Okay.
gonna take one trip to the HOA.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. Our appraisal packages are pretty successful in getting the value, and things that help us do that are these 2 things. Plats or surveys. If you don't have one in your files, quite often you'll find that your HOA does. It was on file maybe when the builder first built it, or it was on file when a previous owner made a change. And so you can use that sometimes. If you didn't get one at the time that you purchased it and or don't have it on file anymore. And then warranty documents, lists of updates, repairs, anything. The prices that if they're spectacular, sure, I'd like to know. This is a $50,000 kitchen update. That would be great for us to be able to tell the appraiser. But generally speaking, I just want the things like quartz versus granite, which we can see ourselves, but sometimes you guys know, oh, this is the level E, blue lapis only available in one cave in Brazil. And so can we use that? Yeah, we can. With the appraiser, we sure the heck can. We can get him thinking, I need to mark up for this kitchen because of some special things that another house won't have. Clarity, title, and underwriting is another hurdle. It's usually not the biggest hurdle we need to worry about, but we do come on the hiccups. I'd say 15% of the time as a rough estimate. Your lender may have additional requirements for repairs and documents. So even if they didn't do a home inspection, but they did a VA loan, the VA lender can come in and say, this staircase has to have a railing, or this rotted wood needs to be repaired. Those are things that you can expect to see in a VA. I don't see it in conventional, and I don't think I've ever seen it in FHA. If your home is in a trust, we would need the trust documents. We'd like to provide that to our title company in advance so they can review it and run through any concerns that they may have. If you have separation documents, say that you have the house and your former spouse is no longer on title, those things like that. Any powers of attorney, your husband's deployed, you're deploying, whatever, and you're going to be signing for him or her, then we would want those things. This is a big one. I had a sale that was actually for my daughter's parents-in-law, and they had paid off their home. And it was many, many years ago, and banks are, closing and merging and being bought out. And it wasn't until we were in the final stages of going to closing that they said, we have a lien against this home. The home equity loan, and I can't remember if this was particularly a home equity loan or their mortgage, showed that it was zero. But the lien was never released against the property, and the county has to do that. So the document certificate of satisfaction specifically, the bank said, congratulations, you paid off your loan, you owe us nothing, we're closed, we're out. But they never sent a certificate of satisfaction to the lien holder or to the county who was reporting the lien. And so we had to get proof that had written proof that had actually satisfied. And because that particular bank had not been sold once, but the one that they sold to got sold to, I think, Truist. And Truist was like, literally, those records are in a box, in a warehouse, and we're gonna have to send somebody over there. We had to delay settlement 3 weeks to go through the box of papers to send something to Prince William County to get this title fully transferable. So if you've done a payoff of a home equity loan or your mortgage, check with the reporting office, the records office in Prince William County to make sure that they also see that as no longer a lien against your property. Your title and your ID need to match, unless you have a marriage or divorce certificate showing the name change. And then death certificates of deceased owners also, same thing. We would need those. You're gonna have something similar to this in your folder. All I want to say is if you think you need something, we know who to call, so just call us. And this is, I thought I hit this slide, but this is my last slide really, and that is that when you follow the process and you get offers quickly, like we have had a little disappointing to us. We love doing open houses. It's one of our favorite things to do as a team. And we have had like 3 weekends in a row with no open houses in Montclair or Ashland because we get so many offers that the seller just wants to lock it up. So, and that comes with when you're generating that much excitement, it comes with an extra dollars per square foot. And so this was our 2025 numbers. And we have to use Montclair's numbers because it's really the only, statistically relevant number of sales when we're doing 80 plus sales in a neighborhood. It's easier than, or when Montclair has 200 and some sales in a year, that we can show these differences of, 19 for townhomes, 23 for single family homes, and ultimately 15% more dollars for the home than what they would get with our competitors. But it's because of the process that I just described. And just kind of hang here and also offer an opportunity to ask any questions. All right, well, thank you, everybody. We look forward to hearing from you and scheduling a consultation whenever you're ready, and providing you some very personalized advice that will hopefully help you with your next steps.